Welcome to the Helson Gallery. My name is Judy Daley. I'm the gallery curator, and today we're going to be talking about the exhibition Field Notes: Observations on Climate Change. This exhibition looks at global warming through the work of 12 artists in various media: printmaking, photography, painting, and installation. A number of the artists are local from the community of Halton Hills. We're going to begin with one of them, and that's a local photographer, Richard Rowland. He's a member of the Halton Hills Camera Club and has won awards for his photographs. We've got 4 photographs by Richard that get us up close and personal with 4 animal species whose habitats are under threat in part due to global warming. The ring-tailed lemur, this animal here, is found only in the rainforests of Madagascar, and global warming is having a severe impact on their food and water sources. We also have images of a polar bear, tiger, and orangutan. Those latter 2 are considered endangered and critically endangered in their natural habitats. Richard's images were made at the Toronto Zoo, and I think that's interesting because zoos really, there's a point of discussion around zoos, and some people have moral and ethical concerns about keeping animals in cages. Other people feel that zoos are really critical in terms of education. And we find this in terms of global warming, in that people who are supporters of zoos and who visit zoos are much more likely to believe that global warming is a real threat. So we might think that perhaps the benefits of zoos in educating the public outweighs the moral or ethical concerns. So we also have some examples of work by Doris Burfind, who is a local photographer, also an award-winning member of the Halton Hills Camera Club. We have some images by Doris of Monarch Butterflies, and this is a very familiar butterfly to us in Ontario. And as a species, it's one that has a complete interdependency with the milkweed plant as a food source and on which it lays its eggs. So when global warming upsets the balance between these 2 interdependent species, that might happen that the timing of the plant's growth or its blooming is thrown off, and that affects the life cycle of the butterfly. Butterflies are important as pollinator species and as are bees. And bees are especially critical because almost 3/4 of the food that is consumed globally, as fruits and vegetables, is dependent on bees, really a critical pollinator species to us throughout the world. We have here a painting by Milton-based artist Martina Coffini, and in it she's exploring texture, but almost giving us a super magnification of the bee, and I think asking us to consider this humble little creature in a new light. We also have some examples of underwater life, and they're seen through the lens of local photographer Greg Coleman, also an award-winning member of the Halton Hills Camera Club. Climate change is the greatest global threat to coral reef systems, and scientific evidence clearly indicates that with rising ocean temperatures, events like mass coral bleachings, infectious disease outbreaks in coral reefs, they're becoming much more frequent, and many corals are now living in the upper limit of their tolerance for high temperatures. If the water cools, within a month, coral can regain its strength, but if it doesn't cool, the coral will die of starvation. So it's a very complex community that is a habitat for an incredible array of plants and animals. So we have 4 examples by Greg that were taken underwater in the Cayman Islands. So he's able to really combine his love of photography with an interest in scuba diving. Next, we have the work of Ingrid Marhoffer and a series of prints in which she deals with endangered plant and animal species on a more local and regional level. Her series Endangered depicts plants and animals alongside images of the built environment. And this series of prints formed the basis of her work entitled After Nature, which was the town of Halton Hills' first commissioned public art project. The series was reproduced on a series of vinyl banners that were displayed in prominent locations throughout Halton Hills earlier in 2020. So the group of works we've been looking at so far, we might think of them as opening a window on the fragility of nature. But there are also some artists in the exhibition whose work speaks more to the forces that are being unleashed by global warming. That's the case with Alan McCord. a local photographer, also an award-winning member of the Halton Hills Camera Club, and his focus is on severe weather events, particularly those happening in southern Ontario. Alan has had a lifelong interest in gazing at the sky and at clouds, and in 2013, chance brought that interest and his work as a photographer together. He's a storm chaser, and this past season in Ontario has brought him a lot of opportunities to photograph severe weather. He's taken seminars with Environment Canada about how to stay safe during a storm, and he's also part of Ontario's Storm Spotter Network. With rising temperatures, Ontario and North America in general are seeing many more incidents of extreme weather, including flood-producing rains and tornadoes. One of these images is actually of Halton Hills. It depicts a wall cloud that was seen over Halton Hills in early August, and this type of cloud can often be a harbinger of tornado activity. Kathy Hopkins, her painting, which is called Blazing Night, she paints primarily plein air, which is outdoors and painting on location, but this is a subject where obviously that was not possible. We can see this is depicting one of the wildfires that has happened recently in California. And that's showing us kind of the other end of the spectrum in terms of global warming when it produces periods of prolonged drought and wildfires then break out. So Kathy worked from photographs to create this very dramatic scene from one of the recent California wildfires. So next we have the work of Demera Sepulveda, who is an artist originally from Nicaragua and is currently based in British Columbia. In her native country, there are many, many active volcanoes, so she has chosen that for the subject matter of her series that depicts the changing landscape surrounding volcanic eruptions. And here too we have an impact with global warming, that when glaciers are expanding, all the ice puts immense pressure on the Earth's surface, and that affects the magma flow. But when glaciers retreat, pressures lift and volcanic activity starts to surge. So we've seen some of that happening throughout the world in recent years as well. This painting is by Corey Trepanier, who is an artist based in Caledon, and he has traveled extensively through the Canadian Arctic, some 60,000 kilometers over the past decade, and through 6 national parks and 16 Inuit communities to capture the spectacular landscapes of the Canadian Arctic. Asgard is a spectacular mountain located in a national park on Baffin Island. In 2018, Corey made a 50-kilometer trek with his daughter to reach it and to capture it in paint. He did that with a very narrow window in terms of the weather, and then was able to translate this into a much larger work when back in the studio. So this painting is the study for Asgard. With his extensive travels in the Arctic over many years, Corey has seen firsthand the impact of global warming on diminishing glaciers. He speculates that if he is to return some years hence to this location, what, if anything, will remain of the area's Turner Glacier? Elsewhere in the world, global warming is having an impact on glaciers, and these 3 photographs are of Mount Kilimanjaro, which is Africa's highest peak. It's located in Tanzania. The photographer is Barb Redford, who also is a member of the Halton Hills Camera Club. Mount Kilimanjaro is over 19,000 feet above sea level and one of the 7 summits of the world. And to celebrate a milestone birthday, Barb decided that she would climb Mount Kilimanjaro. It has a fairly high success rate in terms of summiting people, and as a photographer, it would bring her an unprecedented subject, and she took thousands of photographs. Sadly, global warming is having a drastic effect on the glaciers of this mountain. It has lost half their thickness in a 10-year period. Scientists predicting that if these rates continue, the peak will be ice-free within a few years. So lastly, we have the work of Joseph Lamorado, and this is his piece, Car Collage. Joseph is a Toronto-based artist, and a lot of his practice consists of street installation. So he's taking his work outside the conventional form of presentation in a gallery. This work is adapted from a street installation that Joseph did, but he created it specifically for the exhibition. I think it's really engaging in terms of vibrancy and color, There's a very playful aspect of it too, and feeling of movement created by the sort of wave motion in which the wood panels are presented. But there's also another way in which we can read this work, and I think another sort of layer in which we might interpret it. The piece consists of wood panels, each housing a classic Matchbox toy car. And I think it helps us to consider the car culture that we have in North America, and the fact that that is ingrained in kids from a very early age, and in part like toys like Mattel's Matchbox series help to do that. Like, they're very desirable for kids to play with, for kids to collect. And so we might think about, if we're going to roll back our love affair with the car and the car culture, maybe that has to also start at a very early age. As I said, with these classic Matchbox toys, they've been one of the best sellers that Mattel has had over the years. Millions and millions of kids have played with them, and I think there is maybe some level in which they help to ingrain that desire to own and to drive a car from a very early age. Interestingly, the artist is a cycle commuter himself, residing and working in Toronto, and so obviously taking, personal responsibility for decisions around using a car. And as our research tells us, the car is really the single greatest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and particularly in North America and for Canada, we have statistics showing that there's almost one car per person in our country. And that's rather startling when you think about it, because really there's also a large number of people who are obviously too young to drive their own vehicles. So again, we want people to maybe think about what they can do personally. That would be something I would hope they might take away from this exhibition. It is open to the public currently as we're recording this. We are presently open Wednesday through Sunday, 1 to 5 p.m. The gallery is staffed by volunteer docents, and our open hours are subject to their availability, so you might want to check in advance if you're planning to visit in person. Please know, too, that if you're visiting in person, we are following all the current protocols regarding COVID-19 in order to ensure people a safe visitor experience. The exhibition continues until February 28th, 2021.